Good morning. How are you all doing today? Today we are lighting our way as we wander through all manners of wilderness. We build bridges across the chasms of the unknown and fearsome. Let us find ways to guide each other along life's difficult and rocky path. This togetherness is at the very heart of our community, and to honor this, we will light our flaming chalice today. And I'd like to invite up our youth who are going to do that.
We light our chalice this morning for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Thank you. I'd like to invite you all to rise in body or in spirit and join your voices in song. We are singing Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
And for today, I need 2 youth to volunteer their dads to help me. Jeremy. And David, would you like to? Jeremy, if you'd like to take that mic. David, if you want to take that mic, and just follow the cues. In the mid-1700s, the land that is now Murray Grove in Good Luck, New Jersey, was being farmed by Thomas Potter.
I have built this chapel, but I need a preacher to share the message of universalism.
So back during this time, though he couldn't read, Potter was a successful and deeply religious man. And Thomas Potter had heard of a radical new belief called universalism, the idea that God was a loving God. And many people believed that God was a harsh judge and would send nearly everyone to hell after they died. But Potter invited his friends and neighbors to come to his house and talk about the new idea of a loving God. About 1760, his wife, Mary, having grown tired of hosting such discussions in her house, Thomas Potter built a little church where they could talk.
I have built this chapel, but I need a preacher to share the message of universalism.
About the same time in England, a young man with an intense interest in religion and natural talent for public speaking, he was reaching a life crisis. John Murray also came to believe in universalism, and he became a minister and preached about God's love. At first, he was happy, but then his family died from an illness. He was removed from the church because of his beliefs, and he ended up in debtor's prison.
I am no longer a preacher. I will never preach again.
His friends helped him get out of prison and sent him to make a new life for himself in the Americas. So John Murray gets on a cargo ship and sails across the seas. And as they approach the Americas, they were headed towards Boston, but they got blown down to New Jersey. And in this inlet, they hit a sandbar, and the ship was stuck. So they decided they're going to offload some of the cargo in their smaller boats to lighten the ship so it could get off the sandbar. And they had John Murray head that crew that took all the supplies to shore. And they got all the supplies to shore, the ship got a little bit lighter, it lifted off the sandbar, and moved back out. But at that time, the wind shifted, and they were not able to take all the cargo out to the ship. So the ship just took what cargo it had and went up to Boston. John Murray, expecting them to come back a little bit later, he decided to figure out what is in the area. So he did a little bit of scouting, and he came across this farmland, and he saw a man cleaning fish. And he went up to the man, and he said, "Can I buy some of the fish off you?" The man says, "No, but I'll give you some." And the two people, John Murray and Thomas Potter, got to talking. And Thomas Potter says, "You have a very preachery way about you. Are you a preacher?" And John Murray says, "No." "Are you saying that you've never preached before?" "Well..."
I am no longer a preacher. I will never preach again.
And Thomas Potter said,
I have built this chapel, but I need a preacher to share the message of universalism.
John Murray's like, "Nope, I'm done with preaching." And even though they sat at the hearth of the fire that night and chatted back and forth, John Murray was not going to change his mind. The next morning, the wind is still going the wrong direction, so John Murray is still stuck for another day. And Thomas Potter comes up to John Murray and says,
I have built this chapel, but I need a preacher to share the message of universalism.
and John Murray said,
We've talked about this. I am no longer a preacher. I will never preach again.
So Thomas decided, I'm going to start bargaining. He says, "It's Friday. If you're still here on Sunday, will you preach?" And John Murray's like, "I won't be here by Sunday." "Sure, I'll preach on Sunday if I'm still here." Well, it just so happens that the winds did not change, and come Sunday morning, Thomas Potter said to John Murray,
I have built this chapel, but I need a preacher to share the message of universalism.
and John Murray said, "Okay."
Okay.
So John Murray preached the message of universalism He's like, I kind of like this. Because the people are actually recepting what I'm saying. And after the service that day, the wind changed. And he saw his ship, cargo ship, sailing into the inlet. So John Murray got on, started moving all the cargo back to the ship, went up to Boston, and started a church up there. But Thomas Potter still had a start of starting his church, and that church still stands today in New Jersey, although it has burned down once in the time, but it has been rebuilt. Thank you for helping me today. It's all about being open to change, to expect change, and then to be open to it. Let's stand in body or spirit as we sing hymn number 1058 in the Teal hymnal, Be Ours a Religion. The children will leave with me after the first verse to go to class.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Have faith, they said, and way will open. I have faith, I thought to myself, but what I don't have is time to wait for way to open. I'm approaching middle age at warp speed, and I have yet to find a path that feels right. The only way that's open so far is the wrong way. After a few months of deepening frustration, I took my troubles to an old Quaker woman known for her thoughtfulness and candor. Ruth, I said, people keep telling me that way will open. Well, I sit in the silence and I pray and I listen for my calling, but way is not opening. I've been trying to find my way for a long time. I still don't have the foggiest idea of what I'm meant to do. Way may open for other people, but it's sure not opening for me. Ruth's reply was a model of Quaker plain speaking. In 60-plus years of living, she told me, way has never opened before me. She paused, and I started to sink into deep despair. Was this wise woman telling me that the Quaker concept of God's guidance was a hoax? And then she spoke again, this time with a grin. But a lot of way has closed behind me, and that's had the same guiding effect. When way closes behind us, it is tempting to regard it simply as the result of some strategic error. Had I been smarter or stronger, that door would not have slammed shut. So if I redouble my efforts, I may be able to batter it down again. That is a dangerous temptation. When I resist way closing rather than taking guidance from it, I may be ignoring the limitations inherent in my nature. which dishonors my true self no less than ignoring the potentials that I received as birthright gifts. As Ruth taught me, there is much guidance in way that closes behind us, just as much as there is in way that opens before us. The opening may reveal our potentials, while the closing may reveal our limits. They are two sides of the same coin, the coin called identity. In the spiritual domain, identity is the coin of the realm, and we can learn much about identity by examining either side of the coin. As often happens on the spiritual journey, we have arrived at the heart of a paradox. Each time a door opens, each time a door closes, the rest of the world opens up. All we need to do is stop pounding on the door that just closed and turn around, which puts the door behind us, and welcome the largeness of life that now lies before us. The door that closed kept us from entering a room, but what now lies before us is the rest of reality. My anxiety about way not opening, the anxiety that kept me pounding on closed doors, almost prevented me from seeing the secret hidden in plain sight. I was already standing on the ground of my new life. I was already ready to take the next step on my journey, if only I would turn around and see the landscape that lay before me. If we are to live our lives fully and well, we must learn to embrace the opposites, to live in creative tension between our limits and our potentials. We must honor our limitations in ways that do not distort our nature. We must trust and use our gifts in ways that fulfill our potential. We must take the no of the way that closes and find the guidance that it has to offer. And we must take the yes of the way that opens and respond with the yes of our lives. Those were the words of Parker Palmer. And now I bring to you the words of the Reverend Dr. Richard S. Gilbert. Each morning we hold out the chalice of our being to be filled with the graces of life that abound. Air to breathe, food to love, companions to love, beauty to behold, art to cherish, causes to serve. They come in ritual procession, these gifts of life. Whether we deserve them, we cannot know or say, for they are poured out for us. Our task is to hold steady the chalice of our being. We carry the chalice with us as we go, either meandering aimlessly or with destination in our eye, and we share its abundance if we have any sense, reminding others as we remind ourselves of the contents of the chalice that we don't deserve. Water from living streams fills it if only we will hold it faithfully. We give back, if we can, something of ourselves, some love, some beauty, some grace, some gift. We give back in gratitude, if we can, something like what is poured into our own chalice of being, for those who abide with us and those who will follow. Each morning we hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and to give back. The offering for the support of this church will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you.
With deep gratitude for the generosity of this community, can we all say together, thank you. What lays around the next bend in the road? As we journey through life, can we really foresee what comes next for each of us? If one feels some tinge of anxiety about the unknown future, one should be forgiven. For it also seems that current events of the world are happening at a lightning pace. So much negativity has become commonplace. I think this can only heighten one's anxiety about the future. It has still been challenging for me to find hope when I hear about everything happening in this world, hearing about the darkness of terrorism and violence and what could possibly await us around that next bend in the road. We see and hear about violence in public places affecting innocent people all over. Much of that seems to be connected to growing trends of rigidly held viewpoints, xenophobia and racial bigotry, and various forms of extremism and fundamentalism in all kinds of civic and religious communities. What is happening in the world? Why has it gone wild? If we keep following this path, where will it take us? Many will be familiar with the classic story of wandering in the wilderness, which comes from the Jewish tradition. During the long Exodus, Israelite slaves escaped from Egypt, led by Moses and Aaron, and they headed across the desert to a promised land, a land of milk and honey, they were told. They were dismayed to learn after their long journey on foot to find that the land they were told was granted to them by God was already inhabited. Let us set aside for the moment the obvious parallels between the Israelites' belief that they were promised the land of the Canaanites and how this seems all too familiar when compared to the modern Israelis and the Palestinians. The ancient Israelites doubted what they were told. They were not sure that displacing other people from their homes and taking their land was the right thing to do. And remember that this story comes from the Torah, part of what our Christian brethren call the Old Testament, and the God in those books was an angry deity. So when the people doubted his promise, when they doubted that taking the land of others was right, he condemned them to wander the wilderness for the remainder of the lives of the current generation, which came out to be something along 40 years. Think about that for a moment. Imagine spending the remainder of one's life as a nomad, not by choice, with no permanent place to lay your head at night. In this story, there really is no place like home. The other day, I came across a modern interpretation of this tale by Rabbi Jeffrey Middleman. He reminded his readers that there are lessons to be derived from this story about wandering in the wilderness. And the rabbi made 3 points. The first was that the wilderness, literal or metaphorical, is a scary place because we don't have complete control over what happens to us. Middleman wrote, "Life can be hard and the world can be scary. If we learn to accept that and not expect the world to revolve around us, we can discover the myriad ways in which we can make a difference and invest our energy in those tasks." This reminds me of what I talked about the other day, about the Buddhist teaching of dukkha, which says that trying so hard to control the uncontrollable things in our lives is the cause of our own suffering in life. We find some measure of peace when we learn to live our lives in harmony with the wild, in harmony with the world or the wild, accepting those things that we cannot control even if we would wish it otherwise. The rabbi further suggests that it's good to explore uncharted territory, to be open to new experiences. After all, he says, we never learn and grow if we stay in the same place. He mentions the neurological work of Robert Thatcher, who posited that we periodically let our minds wander aimlessly as a precursor to later focusing and generating creativity from a flash of inspiration and epiphany. That reminds me of the famous author and professor J.R.R. Tolkien, who once wrote that not all those who wander are lost. Sometimes there is a purpose to the wandering, even if that purpose is not explicit or consciously known at the time. The third point made by Rabbi Middleman was that the most important goals are ongoing. We don't achieve finality or closure in the most important of life's goals, such as the goal of being a good person, or raising children to be good people, or having a successful relationship or marriage, or even this congregation striving to be a beacon of hope. Some goals or aspirations are lifelong work. And Middleman ends his essay with this observation. Indeed, that's the great lesson of the Torah itself. Within the Torah's narrative, the Israelites are marching inexorably toward the promised land. They wander for 40 years, a whole generation dies out, they struggle, they rebel, and finally, they set up camp on the other side of the Jordan, ready to arrive at the destination they had been dreaming of their whole lives. And how does the story end? In the wilderness, with the Israelites never reaching the promised land. The rabbi continues, what a wonderful message that truly is, to remind us that our goal in life isn't to reach the promised land, it's simply to keep moving toward it and hoping that we can learn and grow a little bit along the way. So having heard that story, I wonder, what is our promised land? How do we get to this metaphorical place, this land of milk and honey where all is right in the world? Where is this mythical place? It is really scary to contemplate the proverbial wilderness when we see the uncivilized and wild acts that are happening around us, even close to home in America. Violence flaring up like wildfires around the world. It may be that we feel far more comfortable, safer amongst our own than wandering in the wilderness with its vagabonds and monsters. It's easy to name the problems, to call out names at those with whom we disagree. But consider this. What if our focus shifted from what is wrong with people, considering them the monsters in the wilderness, and rather invited them in to be part of civil discourse, inviting them to journey with us? What if we caused our society to shift in such a way that all kinds of people, every kind of people, all of us, African Americans, Muslims, immigrants, gay people, you and me and everyone, all felt like we are all part of a community and part of the conversation, that we are all part of the future, and when we journey together, the wilderness does not seem quite so wild. What if our government took this approach, inviting the marginalized to rise up and journey with us rather than keeping them down in the dirt like so many beggars on the road? How would the world be then? What if we did not engage in classic othering behavior with our leaders and others, calling people not like them by disparaging names, marginalizing and oppressing? Not to mention things happening in our society and around the world, killing Muslim people, people of color, or any other group that may not be dominant in our corner of the world. We, UUs, stand up and proclaim that we journey together in love, so let us not be silent now. As we search for truth and meaning, let us also uphold all human worth and dignity. As we seek to build world community, let us also recall that all living beings are part of an interdependent web of all existence. Yes, it's difficult to live a principled life in a crazy world. All the same, it seems that we cannot help but journey through the wilderness, each and every one of us. But it is not foreordained that we must do so alone. Let us journey together, whether this metaphorical journey be one for all of society or our country or for ourselves personally or even for our congregation. Let us journey together. I'd like to narrow our focus for a bit. By now, it seems obvious that we here in this room are on a journey together. We as a congregation are also wandering through a wilderness, so to speak, and I know that that is a little worrisome to some. Wouldn't it be easier if we made some plans, decided on a course of action tomorrow, and just be done with this transition that the church is in? Why bother with the toils and snares at all? As the good rabbi suggested earlier, and as I'd put it in different words, it's the journey, not the destination, that matters. Part of our journey will be for this congregation to learn how to be a congregation with new leadership, including both professional and volunteer lay leaders. Someone might think that, but we did church before the various reverends that were here before came, and we did just fine. I'm sure that is true. I really do think that is true. But that was back in Egypt, right? In a previous generation, to use the story in the Torah to illustrate our point. The present day is a different time, and there are many different and new people here at DePage UU Church, and even sitting here in this room. My predecessors in ministry here may have been a little like Moses and Aaron. They were like the leaders of the Exodus, leading this congregation from one proverbial place and time. And you and they wandered the wilderness together. And in that time, you grew your community, becoming who you are today. This is a significantly different congregation than it was 40 years ago, or even a decade ago. Now you find yourself wandering in the wilderness again. And yes, I'm wandering with you. I don't necessarily know the way, even though I've wandered similar wildernesses before. Each journey is unique. What we do along the way will be different from one congregation to another, even from one generation to another. With that said, it's important that we discover the myriad ways in which we can make a difference. We're not here for ourselves alone. We shall no doubt pick up wayfarers and stragglers along the way. Here's what I know so far. This is a spiritual community that comes here to worship and learn together. You come to sing. You come to take action on climate change and LGBT equality, a woman's right to choose, Black Lives Matter, and so many other justice issues. You join other faithful citizens to hold vigils and take a stand that we will not become comfortable with the violence that happens around us. Some of you come here to build friendships, to have fun, to go on a picnic or a hike. And some come seeking counsel when having a hard time in their lives. In good times and bad, this community is here for each other. And it is also here for those outside this room who need to hear this amazing message of Unitarian Universalism. That includes work for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, on the local level and on the global level. We nurture children here and adults too. We seek to be present in people's lives, being a rock, a stable place, and a stable community that people can come to consider their spiritual home and family. Once we have done with our wandering in the wilderness, we may yet find that promised land, a metaphor for this collective and covenanted community of all souls that seek to make the world better. When I look at all this church stands for and all that it does, then I feel a sense of hope. hope that felt absent earlier in this sermon when I described pain that seems so present in the world. Here, there is hope. And here, there is joy. It seems to me that this is why we come to church, why we come to DePage. We come here from our various wanderings to heal ourselves so that we can then go out and help to heal the world. This journey we are on, as we wander through the wilderness, is a yearning and striving towards a more positive future than the present. Let's provide an example for others by sharing our way of being together in hopes that others can learn from this. As we journey through life, may we live our principles openly and publicly so that others can take notice and do likewise. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. And as we continue wandering on our journey, love will guide us. Our closing hymn is 131 in the gray hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Not all those that wander are lost. If the wilderness seems a scary place, then let us take the hands of those around us. This is a physical reminder that we are not on this journey alone. We wander through this wilderness together, and love will guide us. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all.